Today's radio KD8TTE is going to show you how to prepare for the annual simulated emergency test in amateur radio. We're going to focus on the 2020 exercise in the Ohio section. Stick around. SWAN. So today we're talking about the Simulated Emergency Test, the SET. We're going to talk about what it is, why to participate, how to prepare for it, and what to do now to make sure that you are ready when the time comes. First of all, what is the SET? The SET is a nationwide exercise where amateur radio stations are able to do three things. First, we want to determine the strengths and weaknesses of the ARES, that is the Amateur Radio Emergency Service groups throughout the country at the local as well as the section levels. We want to provide a public demonstration of the capabilities of amateur radio and the organizations that are making amateur radio work in public service. And also we want to help the radio operators to gain experience in operating with the kinds of modes and the kinds of conditions that they would need to use in an actual emergency. So when we talk about determining the strengths and weaknesses in an exercise environment, it's important to remember that what we're looking for here is not to test who is the best operator or what problem somebody has. This is a test in a no-fault learning environment of how well the system works. So we're going to be pushing the envelope in many cases. We're going to be reaching for things that are just barely within our capability and maybe some things beyond. The idea is that we're going to be able to see how well we do, what we do especially well, things that we do poorly, and things that we need to improve on will come out of that discussion. And then the next thing that we're looking to do is to provide a public demonstration to the partners and the agencies that amateur radio operators would be serving in the event of an actual emergency. So before they're going to rely on their local ARES groups, we need to make sure that they understand what those capabilities actually are, and if they are able to see us operating in a realistic environment, that's going to provide the basis for some confidence that we can actually get that job done. And of course, the third thing that we're looking to do is to give people the experience so that when they are operating, they understand what emergency mode is like, how that's different from their day-to-day operation, the kinds of procedures that they're going to need to use in an emergency, and that can be something that would be unique to a specific situation, and adaptability is going to become very important. In any case, we're developing experience through training in a highly realistic scenario. A lot of people will say that when things get serious, they are going to rise to the occasion or they're going to be paying particular attention. That's not how it works, in fact. Archilicus had this right a long time ago when he said, "We don't rise to the level of our expectations, we fall to the level of our training." When things get difficult for us, we're not going to be able in that moment to learn new procedures and suddenly find a way to have better skill than we've managed to develop when it was easy. What we're going to do is fall back to whatever it is that comes natural, and that's going to be whatever it is that we've practiced. This is the reason why training is so important, and it's critical that we train hard when it's easy so that those skills will be there when it's not. The simulated emergency test gives us that opportunity. So when we take a look at what it is that we need to do in an emergency, that's going to tell us what we need to do in the simulated emergency test. So if we're talking about the job that is going to be done by an emergency coordinator for an amateur radio emergency services group or a net manager, whether that's a traffic net or an ARES tactical net, there's a couple of things that we need to make sure we understand. The essential tasks are going to be to receive an activation request. Amateur radio and volunteers in general are taught not to self-activate, not to self-deploy. The idea is that they have already established relationships with the agencies, with the NGOs, and so on that may need that service, and there needs to be a means by which those officials will request assistance, and the proper assistance can be sent to the proper place to get the mission done and not to create more chaos in a situation that's already confusing. Once that information has been received and the request has been made, we now move on to the next phase, which is to establish the roles that are going to be necessary to meet that need, and then to establish a schedule. Volunteers are very often willing to go into a situation, but if you've got a disaster response you're dealing with, that's not something that's going to wrap up in 4 hours or 8 hours or maybe a day, maybe a week. So you need to have a schedule that allows people to volunteer while also taking care of whatever else they need to take care of. That might mean that they have to go to work in a day or two, and we have to make sure that we take advantage of whatever they are offering while at the same time not taking more than they have offered. And then, of course, the emergency coordinator is going to need to direct the mobilization and the demobilization of resources so that those roles have been filled according to the schedule, and the people are able to fill those slots by mobilizing and demobilizing as necessary. When it comes to the radio operator, the task list is going to be much more focused. That is going to be focused on the origination of a message. That is to say, hearing something or getting a piece of paper handed to them from an agency representative or somebody who is an official, and turning that into a form that can be sent by radio. That is the process of origination. The second step is going to be the relay of a message by sending it, the transmission of the message that has been formatted. The third step, of course, is to receive that message as it is being transmitted, and then there is going to be the delivery process. That is taking the radio message and turning it back into something that can be presented to an official on the other side of that communication in a way that makes sense. We've talked about this in earlier videos, and we showed what these steps are. So to drive home this point, origination is not stuff that happens on the radio. You are not typically going to get something from an agency that is ready for transmission. Many times you're not even going to get something like a 213 that's already been completed. You're going to have somebody say, these are the things that I need, and they might spell it out for you if it's complicated. And in any case, it is the job of the originator, the station of origin, to create the message and to create it in a way that is going to get the information across. That means to transmit the message, you have to know things about it, and that's why we talked about the preamble. That's the reason why we talked about addressing. That's the reason why we talked about accounting. That is the process of origination, taking the message that a person has and formatting it so that it can be transmitted. Sending the message is going to be where we now have radio activity. And it doesn't need to be the same radio operator. It doesn't need to be the same person at the station who's performing the function of origination and relay. In fact, on a station with multiple operators, a large agency station, for example, it might not be the case at all. So one person may do the origination and another person do the transmission. In any case, that transmission, the sending of the message, is stuff that happens on air, and that is going to be received, of course, on the other side, and that, of course, is going to be also on-air activity. That's also part of relay. That's the receipt of the message. And once it's there, before it can be presented back to somebody in an agency, it has to be turned into something that the person at the agency is going to understand. So you never want to take something and read it off to somebody at the agency by starting out with a bunch of radio speak. Number 257, priority. There's just not going to be any interest in that. It's completely unnecessary. All of that stuff is for the radio operators to make sure they get the job done properly. Once the message is at the destination and it comes time to deliver, what the person receiving the message should see is going to be the same thing that the person who needed the message sent in the first place presented. So, how have we been preparing for this? The SET is coming up. It's only about 4.5 weeks away as I'm talking about this now. And so there's going to be a lot of stuff that needs to happen. How have we been preparing? Well, that's going to be our County Information Report project. We have been working at this since the very beginning of July. The concept here has been for us to communicate with one another using radio-only messaging. So at the section level, we've been taking messages and creating them for the district emergency coordinators, and so that gets distributed through the system. Each district emergency coordinator gets a message, reads it, understands, acts on it, and in fact needs to create messages for the emergency coordinators within the district. So those messages in turn get sent down to the counties. The counties are able to receive them, and the emergency coordinator in the county receives the message, makes sense of it, acts upon it, and then creates a message that will be in response and heads back to the section. So that's going to go first up to the district, and then the district is going to take that again up to the section. And so we have had a message go from the section to the district down to the county, and then every county will have a reply that goes back up to the section through the district. So our performance during this is variable. Some counties have started out with a lot of difficulty and then started to work through the process and have been able to establish the kinds of infrastructure necessary to get that job done. And some have even gone back and been able to finish up any of the loose ends that they had in the early objectives. And so they're looking very good throughout the whole thing. Others are building up the capabilities still, and that's perfectly understandable. It takes time to make this stuff work, and we've been at it for about 8-9 weeks now, so we're another 4 weeks away. So we're well into this process, and we're expecting that we're going to see more of the districts getting into a position where they are going green or at least yellow in terms of the level of participation they have from their counties. The SET is a 48-hour period. Operations begin October 3rd. The planning has already started, and so we need to make sure that we are getting ready now at the county level, as well as at the district level, and of course at the section level. So, if you are an emergency coordinator, you need to take a look at the ARRL Form A for the SET. And that will show you the information that the league is looking for and how these activities are going to be scored. That, when you see it at the very beginning, becomes very important so you can understand what the priorities are. I've got an article in the Ohio Section Journal this week that goes into each of these forms and gives a line-by-line commentary on them, so I'm not going to do that here. I will, however, point out just a couple of things. Number one is going to be on the Form A. When you are looking at what kinds of things are going to get you points, it's going to be the number of participants you have, the number of new participants you have, how many are on emergency power, how much support you're offering to agencies, that is, how many agencies you're supporting, and also when it comes to the messaging. Form A, what is reported by the emergency coordinators, is going to be the origination and the delivery of traffic. That's it. Origination and delivery. We're not talking about on-air activity getting points in Form A. It is taking the thought that somebody has and turning it into a message prepared for transmission, or taking a message that has been transmitted and turning it back into something that a person at the agency is going to use. Those are very important terms of art. Origination and delivery. You don't get points for relay on Form A. And that's the reason why, if you are an emergency coordinator, you need to pay attention, because if you have a county net, a net that is going to support your ARES operation, and you send messages over it, you're definitely going to need to have that Form B. Form B is not just the NTS form. Form B is for net managers. So if you're in a county where the emergency coordinator and the net manager are the same person, then that one person is going to fill out Form A and Form B. In counties where you have some separation of duties there and the net manager is appointed separately from the emergency coordinator, then you're going to have that person fill out the Form B. If you're an NTS net manager, of course, you're going to complete a Form B as well. And then what you're going to see is that we have totals for traffic. And that's not for origination, it's not for delivery, it is only for relay. So, of course, there's going to be some more points awarded for the number of stations participating in the net, those who are new and those who are operating on emergency power, as well as the number of different stations that you had operating as net control. So we have these two forms demonstrating very clearly for us the relationship between ARES and NTS. Each of these are half of the puzzle that goes into effective emergency communications for anything greater than the size of a county, or anything that traverses a boundary of a county. You need to have the ability to originate messages for the agency if you're going to do any good. And that is where ARES will focus. You're going to have people who can work in an emergency operations center. Again, that is where ARES will focus. That is the reason why there is the ICS and the NIMS foundational courses as part of the requirement that we have for operating at level 2 or beyond in ARES. That is going to need to be paired with the capability to relay those messages. And that is the job of NTS. NTS is focused not necessarily on ICS and NIMS and having people at EOCs and so on. That is going to be the network of radio operators out there somewhere able to receive messages and to get them to the proper net that will move them closer to their destination until finally those messages can get to a point where there is going to be another ARES operator who will perform the function of delivery. So, ARES and NTS are two halves of the same thing. That is the field organization of the American Radio Relay League. These are not two separate entities that don't work together. They are two halves of the same thing, and it is incumbent upon us to work with one another so that both of these specialties can be employed to get that job done. So when it comes to the SET for 2020 in the Ohio section, we're going to be working as part of an exercise that is known as Black Swan. That's about a week long. This is an agency exercise. So the kinds of things that we're going to have the amateur radio stations doing, it's not going to be something that hams have cooked up on their own ideas of what should or should not be happening. These are people that are actually working in agencies, people that are going to be in the position of needing to rely on those amateur radio operators to move those messages properly. And so if you want your ARES group to be able to work as part of the SET and not come up with your own scenario, not come up with your own exercise, to be able to play off of others who are also involved, then you're going to be able to do so. Go to the blackswancomics.org website, and you can register to play. Give us a little bit of information about your group, including your force strength and when you expect to be in operation, and we'll make sure that our controllers have you built into the plan. And if you do not have somebody at your agency who is going to be activating you, then we have controllers who are going to be able to play the role of the agency to create those initiating phone calls to get you started. You need to be familiar with what this is all about, and we're not giving a whole lot of detail about this exercise. So you should take a look at what is actually there, and the emergency coordinators page does give a little bit of background and helps the ECs to understand what they need to do to help get their people ready. Coordination is again going to be important. The ARES and the NTS people need to be working together to get this job done. So the traffic managers also need to be involved here. So if you are a net manager, whether it's for the NTS or a net manager of a tactical ARES net, you need to make sure you understand what that Form B is about, that you understand what the tasks are that need to be accomplished, and that you have everything organized so that you can get that job done and carry the messages. So now is the time to evaluate how well you've been doing and where things that are not working need to be helped out a little bit. Remember, we're not going to just throw you in the deep end of the pool. We've been doing this in small steps every week, giving everybody a chance to come up to speed. If you are still having problems, ask for help. We have the structure in place for a reason. Counties are supported by districts. Districts are supported by the section. You don't have to suffer in silence trying to figure out how to make all of this work, or assume that you do not have the operators to get the job done. Whether you've got 2 operators, 200 operators, or anywhere in between, you are part of a larger system that is going to be able to support agencies and the public in the time that they need communication services the most. That's really what it comes down to. The simulated emergency test this year is going to be an interesting one, and I can tell you that part of our group that is creating this exercise is a team of MDs. And the kinds of things that we're going to be sending around are not going to be something that just came out of a training manual. This is going to come from real-world experience and the kinds of things that will actually need to be done in the event that we have a large-scale incident. So again, be prepared. The first full weekend of October is when the SET is held, and this year we are playing as part of the Black Swan communication exercise. So do make sure you are paying attention. Do make sure that your people in your organization know about this. This is not something to give them a couple of days ahead of time. Every one of your members of your nets, every one of the members of your ARES organizations should already by now have seen the blackswancomex.org website. And if they haven't, make sure that they have. If they've seen it once and they haven't gone back, make sure they go back again. People need to be prepared for this. This is an excellent opportunity for us. Remember, we have 3 things that we are trying to accomplish here, and this is a great opportunity to get all 3 of those things done. That is, to determine the strengths and weaknesses of the system, to be able to demonstrate our capability to the agencies that we hope will call us in the event they need communication support, and then, of course, to give our operators a chance to train, to be able to work in a realistic scenario, and to develop their skills so that should that call come, they are in fact ready to perform. I hope that this has been helpful. Contact me if you have any questions or comments. Do like the video, share it, and subscribe to the channel to make sure that you don't miss any of these videos. And I hope to see you soon. This is Radio KD8TTE, out.